We're only one game in, and I'm already sitting here wondering, do the Illini have too many good players?
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Locked On Illini. Thank you all so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. My name is Verma, your host here at Locked On, where I continue to provide you coverage each and every day. Everything you see and hear is going to be absolutely free. The only thing I ask for in return is, if you don't mind, make sure you hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel as I get closer and closer to hitting 4,000 on YouTube. We're already the second biggest Illini-based show on YouTube. Let's get closer to the first one. Today's episode is going to be a fun one. We're going to kind of switch back over to basketball. First and foremost, I'm going to have a little fun with you guys in the sense of trying to figure out what the most optimal lineup is going to be for this men's basketball team. And I'll tell you, I got into wanting to have this conversation because I rewatched the tape from their game against Jackson State, and I'll have a player grades segment for you right after this. But again, this is more just fun conversation. It's very early in the season, and we don't really even know what Mihailo, Petrović, and Andrej Stojaković are going to look like when they're healthy. But I think it's worth having a conversation of where they're going to fit on this basketball team. So you and I together, and let me know in the chat section, what you think the optimal starting lineup is going to be as well. I'm just going to throw a couple ideas out at you, not necessarily because I believe them, but because I think it warrants conversation. I think center spot, clearly, Tomislav Ivicic, the quietest 21 points you're ever going to see on Monday night against Jackson State. One of the best big men in the entire country. You're solidified there, as well as the point guard spot. I think with Kylan Boswell there, what you have, your two captains. We start off there. There's no need to have any sort of conversation at all between those two. And quite honestly, the three experiences we've had with David Mirkovic now, two that we've been able to see with our own eyes in the exhibition matchup against Illinois State, and of course on Monday against Jackson State, and what we've heard about how good he was in that Florida Gators secret scrimmage. I think it's pretty safe to say David Mirkovic is a starting power forward on this Illini team. Those three, I think, without question, at this point, you need those three in your starting five. Next up, let's go to the two spot where Keaton Wagler is starting. And ideally, I said in the offseason, I wanted him to be the seventh guy on the team. That I really liked his game, and I still do, but I wish the hype train didn't get as aggressive as it did with Keaton. But with recent wins, even before the injuries, making it sound like Mihailo Petrović was going to come off the bench. Now, my everydayers in here know I'm a big Mihailo guy, and I think he can be an absolute, when he reaches his peak powers, he could be a guy who could be in the conversation of an all Big Ten team. Maybe that's not this year. Maybe that's something we're going to have to wait on next year. Keep in mind, he's a sophomore, so we're going to have him for a couple more seasons. But I think the play that you saw from him against Illinois State, and then in his debut against Jackson State, you saw just how comfortable he can look. He's, I think, maybe perfect for this role at his size, being 6'6", standing next to Kylan Boswell. We know that Brad Underwood loves size, and he loves length. And it's one thing when you know that your team isn't going to be all that great ultimately defensively, which this team's not. We'll see what kind of fingerprints we can see from Cameron Crocker's new defense that he's going to be putting together. But for the most part, when you just take a look at the talent available on this roster, they're going to be superb. One of the best offensive teams in the country, but on the defensive side, they're probably not going to be as high as we want. Now, don't get me wrong, KenPom right now, we're still very, very high, but I think that kind of remains to be seen. So having said that, with Kylan back there, maybe having a guy like Keaton Wagler, who I think is capable of being an average defender and playing off of Kylan Boswell. I think I'm now more okay with the decision, if that is the ultimate decision, that Keaton is your starting number 2. He had 18 points and he shot 8 free throws against Jackson State on Monday. That's all you need. Maybe Keaton's just not one of those guys who you need so much from. He's one of those guys where you can kind of look. Last year's team with Will Riley and Kasperius Jakushonis, we were dependent on him in so many ways that they're almost forced to be the star players on this team. Keaton might just be one of those guys who can be, and he's going to have nights where he is the star player on this basketball team, but he's in his best situation, whereas he doesn't need to be. He isn't being counted on being. And I think, him scoring 18 points on Monday isn't a mirage. I don't think he's going to score 18 every night. I don't even think he's going to be a double-digit scorer once a Big Ten play hits. But I think he's talented enough. I think he's shown enough, and he plays good enough defense that having him as your starting shooting guard is you're talking about 4 guys who could very well be a team that wins, at least competes for a Big Ten championship. And then we come to the third spot, which maybe even a couple weeks ago, I would have been like, well, yeah, Andrej Stojaković. I think that's clearly there. Now we still, as of this recording, don't have an update on Andrej. I believe Brad Underwood meets with the media. He'll meet on Thursday because we have a game on Friday. So maybe he'll have an update by the time you're watching this. But Andrej's situation is interesting for me. Now, clearly, I think, because they talked about his defense all off season long. I've said this on the show before. I watched his tape. I think he's an average to above average defender. Now, maybe on this team, that just kind of stands out because this team isn't exactly full of great defensive basketball players. But there's naturally, you would think the guy who scored 18 points last year in the ACC would be a starter on this team at the small forward spot. And of course, I've sat here and said that he could be one of the 2-3 best players on this basketball team. So don't call me a hypocrite. Like, what I'm trying to do right now is just have a conversation and hear me out. We had Jake Davis start on Monday, and you saw how well Jake Davis played. Jake is not a star in any stretch of the imagination. But does this team need another star in the starting lineup? This David Mirkovic emergence has been incredible to watch. And now whether he's going to be able to continue this positive momentum as the competition steps up, we'll see. But between David and Tomislav Ivičić and Kylan Boswell and maybe even Keaton Wagler, the offensive contributions from whoever's going to be playing the small forward spot aren't going to be huge. And so there is a scenario out there that I'm throwing out at you. And again, let me know where maybe it just makes sense to start Jake Davis at that spot. Jake is not strong enough nor athletic enough to guard Big Ten fours, which unfortunately he was asked to do. When Morez Johnson went down, he was asked to play 5s in the Big Ten Conference last year. And we all know how awfully that ended up. But Jake, at the very least, can keep his own when it comes to on the defensive side against Big Ten small forwards. He's below average, don't get me wrong. But with him on the starting lineup, you really open up the floor for guys like Tomislav Ivičić and David Mirkovic. You open up the fact that one of them can go inside, and they're both very high IQ players. They can both shoot themselves. So, again, you can utilize both David and Tommy on the floor together, which is a huge hack. But with Andrej Stojaković, who only shot about 32% from three-point range last year, you wonder if maybe having a guy like Jake Davis out there in that starting lineup spot might be the more optimal lineup. And then you have guys like Mihailo Petrović and Andrej Stojaković coming off the bench. This might be silly talk. We don't exactly know how much Stojaković signed for when it came to his NIL. We went very aggressively towards him, so he was absolutely a priority to bring onto this basketball team. But the reality is, Andrej Stojaković has missed a month and a half of practice. And this team right now looks really good. And that's not just me saying it with my Locked On Illini hat on. A lot of national commentators I've been watching, they're all kind of saying the same thing. I believe Greg from Sleepers literally called us a potential Final Four team. And maybe that's a little exaggerated right now. We need to watch a little bit more of this team, which we will on Friday, and we're going to have 2 games next week. But clearly the ceiling is very high. And if you watched my episode on Wednesday, you saw that I think that this team's potential could be higher than the team 2 years ago that went to the Elite Eight. So if you're Brad Underwood, do you mess with that? What is your priority? Do you bring in Stojaković, a guy whose game may or may not complement the other 4 guys on the floor? Look, I like the idea of having Stojaković being 6'8". If he is focused on defense and he doesn't need to score 18, if he's okay scoring 12 points and just kind of being a role player, maybe a super role player on this team. Because from what we've seen of Mirkovic and Tommy, those 2 are going to be the stars. David might be a superstar in college basketball. We'll see. I mean, he's off to a great, fantastic start. But there's just one side of me, after watching this game for the second time when I was putting these player grades together, which I'm going to get to in the next segment, where I was just like, you know what? Maybe this is a perfect role for Jake Davis. You know how I discussed on the show that Ben Humrichous, I really hope he has a redemption season. I think he's capable of doing it because he's not going to be counted on as the Marcus Domask savior replacement. That now he can come off the bench or just be counted on to be the 5th or 6th best, highest scorer on your team. You saw how well he performed on Monday, right? He had 21 points, 5 3-pointers, because there's no pressure in his role. I almost wonder that maybe the optimal lineup is you have your starting 5 with Jake Davis, and then the 3 guys off your bench are eventually Mihailo Petrović, Andrej Stojaković, and Ben Humrichous. And then, of course, Big Z. That's a really good backup lineup. That's a really good second team lineup. And maybe Andrej is way too good for that. Just last week I was talking about how him and Mirkovic are really the only, him and Avicic are really the only guys who are getting NBA mock draft potential. But I just thought it was maybe worth conversation. I'm not reporting anything, not at all. This is simply a thought that came to mind as I was rewatching this game. Let me know your guys' feedback. Am I crazy to think that? Would you entertain the idea? Or are you locked in on Andrej Stojaković being your 3rd and going forward with that? When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects. And while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts fast for a project? Supply House has next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. Their Trademaster perks like priority shipping and dedicated support make the whole process smoother. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. And welcome back. I know I'm a little bit late on this. I sometimes forget that there's multiple basketball games per week, so I'll try to get these out sooner when it comes to after watching the actual game itself. But I'm going to do the player grades for what I saw against Jackson State. I got my notes right here. So I'm going to start with the A's. Let's put it that way. And I think there's 2 guys who played the optimal versions of their games. And number 1, I have to start with David Mirkovic. Why not? 19 points, 14 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 turnovers, but David was a star in that game, and he was the superstar in a game on a team that has a lot of very good players. I've mentioned this a few times, both on this show and Talk Illini, that David at halftime already had a double-double. Now, keep in mind, he was the first player to have a double-double in his debut since Kofi Cockburn. That's pretty good company. And quite honestly, if Illinois was playing a little tougher competition, David could very well have gone for a triple-double. He had 4 assists, and there was plenty of occasions where you saw him grab the rebound and dribble down the court, as if, I think Greg calls him the Draymond Green he referenced him to as in the season preview episode. Perfect comparison. David's special. It's a simple matter. I'm trying not to get too overhyped. He was one of my guys this entire offseason. I think he really jumped out at me at the FIBA under 18s when I was there to scout Tommy Sarr. I'm like, David looks like he actually kind of belongs. But, whether he's going to be able to continue this momentum or not, he was clearly the best player on Illinois against Jackson State. And it looks like he may just be the best player on Illinois, which would be a very pleasant surprise and which would answer my number one question when it comes to this team reaching its potential and its ceiling was, who does this team have a superstar on it? I like Tommy. I like Kylan. I like Andrej Stojaković. But I did question last week before the season started, who's going to be the guy, who's going to be the superstar to take this team to the next level. And from the 2 glimpses that we've seen of David and the one that we heard from that Florida game, it looks like Mirkovic could absolutely be that guy. The other guy to get an A in this game is his backup, the guy who people were arguing. Well, not many people were arguing. Well, we feel like only Brad Underwood really thought this was viable, was Ben Humrichous. A guy who a lot of people thought maybe would start at the 4, but I'm glad that Brad came to that realization that no, you don't need to ease David's way into the starting lineup spot. He's just that good. And so Ben came off the bench and he had 21 points on 6 of 11 shooting, 5 of 9 from 3-point land. The only blemishes were 2 ill-fated dunk attempts. I'll try to put that in a politely way as I possibly can. But I talked about this in the previous segment. I think Ben is finally in a role which I think he can absolutely excel at. As long as there's no expectations, with his length and his shooting ability, he is the prototype of the type of player that should succeed in a Brad Underwood offense. But now that the expectations, which felt more like burdens for Ben last year, are kind of gone, and he can come in, play 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and get a couple open 3-pointers from guys like David, Tommy, and eventually Mihailo Petrović. I think this is the perfect case scenario for Ben, and I do think that he's in line for possibly one of the best comeback stories when it comes to Illini folklore. When it comes to those are the only 2 A's I had. I did have an A-, and that was for Keaton Wagler. I could have gone A, but if you watch the game again, he was struggling a little bit in that first half. You saw the apprehension that he tends to have. That was talked about him having, but in the second half, that all went away. He attacked the rim. He had no problems. 10 free throws. He made 8 out of 10 free throws. He's really by far the team leader on that front. And if that's the type of role he can play, a guy who's just there, 6'6", he's not going to make the wrong play. He's going to be aggressive when your team needs, if the other team is on a run and you need someone to get to the free throw line just to slow things down, Keaton looks like he could be that guy. He came in with a lot of hype this offseason, and in his debut game, have 18 points on 4 of 8 from the field goal, 2 of 2 from 3-point land, and again, the 8 of 10 from free throw land. You're in pretty good shape. And I haven't even mentioned the 6 rebounds and 4 assists that he had and the 2 steals. I think it was a fantastic debut for Keaton Wagler and David Mirkovic. And when you talk about 2 of the freshmen in their debuts having A grades, what a start for the Illini. And we move on to the B's. For a B+, I gave to Tomislav Visic. Again, one of the quietest 21 points that you're going to have. He was 9 of 12 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3-point land. He scored the first basket of the game. 0 for 2 from free throw land. Only 4 rebounds and 0 assists, which is why I kind of dinged him. He didn't quite have an A performance despite playing very limited minutes. The playmaking wasn't necessarily there, but you kind of had David doing that. But I do think moving forward, you're going to see a lot of the offense ran through your 4 and 5. And, Tommy being one of the leaders on this team, one of the best offensive, just all-around players, not just on this team, not just in the Big Ten Conference, but in the entire country. Tomislav is obviously on a minutes restriction. They're trying to slowly wean him in so that he's going to be ready to go, in particular when the competition really steps up next week. B plus for his debut. I don't think that's too bad. Another B plus for me was Jake Davis, a guy who his good play on the court after that rewatch spurned that conversation for me in the first segment of should we at least entertain the idea that maybe Jake should be playing starting minutes. He made those corner threes when he needed to. He was 13 points, a guy who a lot of people were shocked was even a starter against Jackson State, but not just the 13 points. He passed the ball around. He got 4 assists. He had 4 rebounds. He had a steal. He did exactly what Jake Davis does. And if you're one of my everydayers, and let me know in the chat if you are, I'm a Jake Davis guy. Right. To me, he plays. Last season, I constantly said he plays like a coach's son. He knows where to be on the court. Nothing he does is going to jump out at you. But when he's knocking down those shots, then that's when this offense really, really does get going. So a fantastic performance by Jake Davis. As for when it comes to B, I gave that to Kylan Boswell. Now, I think with Kylan, he could have probably bumped that up to B plus or A minus, but I think he was kind of in cruise control for most of that game. He had 10 points, 4 of 9 from field goals, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals. He did have a turnover. Colin was just kind of coasting, and I think we saw a lot of that in Illinois State as well. Supposedly, he had a really good game against the Florida Gators. Again, I can't confirm that. I didn't watch it, but Kylan really seems to be in, hey, let me get my teammates settled mode early this season. And, we'll see if that ramps up a little bit on Friday. I don't think it necessarily needs to, but I think Kylan understands and sees the big picture here. And he wants to get his teammates ready to go because he trusts himself that when times get tough, Kylan will be there. And so for me, I gave him a B grade. And finally, we get to B minus, which quite honestly was the lowest grade I gave from this game. If you think someone was deserved of a grade lower than that, let me know. But B minus, I gave to Big Z. Big Z was 4 points, 2 of 5 from the field, 0 of 3 from three-point land, but he did have 9 rebounds and 1 assist. And you saw Brad Underwood really get on him. And I think Brad's going to try to establish with Z, hey, on offense, shoot the 3. On defense, grab rebounds. Try to get there to block shots because Tommy and David Mirkovic, as talented as they are, they're not shot blockers. And Big Z on the opposite end, he had 2 blocks in this game. He can be. So Z's going to be one of those enigmas on this team where he's going to eventually have to settle into a role. I wouldn't say it was a failure by any stretch, but, nothing stood out at you. But again, you like the 9 rebounds that you saw from Big Z. Jason Jaxis, also a B minus for me. Just he did what you asked him to do. You can tell if you saw what he looked like last year, he's bulking up a little bit, which is all you really want. You don't want to count on Jason for too many minutes this season, but the guy came in and I believe had 9 rebounds. A guy, he had assist. He was productive in the minutes that he was afforded, and that's all you can really ask for. You want to know that, if one of the Aviciches got into foul trouble, can you at least hold it down with Jason Jaxis? And I think right now, at least through game 1, Jason's proving that maybe you can. And then the final B minus was to Blake Fegbemi, the greatest athlete that Brad Underwood has ever coached. Okay, Brad. Well, Blake did what he was expected to do. I would say beyond what he was expected to do. I don't think anyone expected Blake to play any meaningful minutes. I think Brandon Lee getting hurt right before the game, the day before in that practice, kind of elevated Blake to more minutes than anyone was expecting. And Blake will probably be counted on to play major minutes on Friday. And as we wait to get more of an update from Brad about Brandon Lee's status. Again, he probably mentioned something on Thursday. We'll find out. But Brad did say in the post-game press conference on Monday that he expected Brandon to be out, which means Blake Fegbemi is going to be playing more minutes, more minutes than at least initially anticipated. But he did what you could ask for. The guy's obviously limited in size, but overall, it was a great performance by this Illini basketball team, and it's got me excited. It's not just got me excited; it's got you guys excited. I see the comments that you guys are telling me in the comments section, how you see that this team has the potential to be very, very good. And it's only game 1, and game 2 is going to be a little bit tougher, and then the real trouble is going to start next week as we're going to be playing number 10 Texas Tech. I believe that game is in Champaign, thankfully. But all in all, player grades, game one, I'm very satisfied. And if this is just a glimpse of where things go, I think Illinois might be in really good shape. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets from everything from who's going to score next to who might be making a comeback in the fourth quarter. Plus, you can even combine all those live bets into a same game parlay and get an even bigger payout. It keeps every game excited, whether you're interested in the two teams or not. But particularly, if your team's making a late push, why not get in on the action? Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. On Tuesday night, the Illini women's basketball team kicked off their season, and they wasted zero time reminding everyone why the expectations are very high on this basketball team. Shauna's green squad took care of business, a 91-67 victory over Southeast Missouri State, a game where Illinois started off a little slow, but quite honestly, the result was never in doubt. Illinois never trailed. They had a lot of energy, poise, balance, but the star of this game was the headliner, and that's Barry Wallace. What a performance. Career high 27 points, 11 rebounds, a double-double to open the season. She looked confident, physical, and completely in control of the game on both ends of the floor. You could feel her leadership from the opening tip. Then off the bench, you had Maddie Weber, who gave Illinois a serious scoring punch. 16 points, while Gretchen Dolan quietly put together one of the best all-around games as an Illini. 16 points, 7 assists, and a steady hand running the offense. This women's team moved the ball beautifully, and that's, at least to me, what jumped out the most. 19 assists on 31 made baskets. And when you talk about Shauna Green basketball, that's how you define it. Dolan had 7, Destiny Jackson added 6, and nearly every rotation player got involved. The spacing looked crisp, the tempo was quick, and Illinois turned good shots into great shots all night long. And you love seeing this. Letty Vasconcelos, finally back after missing over 600 days, made her Illinois debut. 7 points, 6 rebounds, and a smile that said everything. Talk about not just a feel-good moment for her, but a feel-good moment for the locker room and Illini athletics. Now, in terms of flow, Illinois jumped out early, led 19-15 after the first. Then it blew it open by the middle quarters. They led by 12 at half, stretched it to nearly 30 by late in the third. And at that point, things were all about just managing minutes and keeping pace. Illinois scored 16 of their 29 third quarter points in the paint. Something you can tell Shauna Green wants to really establish, where she wants to establish her dominance. Offensively, there's still a little tightening to do. Some transition miscues, a few fouls that you kind of wish didn't have to happen, but it was the opener. And that's, if you're going to have them, that's when you want to have them. Overall, this team, despite not being one, looked like a pretty veteran group that maybe in time, as they practice more together, will know where each role settles. Bottom line, Illinois came out looking like a team with hoping for postseason aspirations, not one still finding its identity. Barry Wallace, to me, looks like a huge step up. She's definitely leveled up. Gretchen Dolan looks like a floor general ready for a breakout year. And with all the depth that this team has, I mean it, this team has a loaded roster. It's starting to show that this team could compete in the Big Ten Conference. The Illini return to action Sunday against Illinois State, an in-state battle that should bring a little extra juice to the State Farm Center. If opening night was any sort of indication, and I've been saying this all offseason long, this team is going to be fun to watch. Thank you for making Locked On Illini your first listen today. And for your second listen, check out Locked On Big Ten. Craig Chabon breaks down the most exciting conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championship and every game in between. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's going to wrap it up for me today. Again, we got more basketball content for you. I'll have a basketball preview up for you for the Friday matchup against Florida Gulf Coastal, and we'll be talking a little football as well later on this week. Make sure you don't miss a thing by liking this video and making sure you're subscribed to the channel. Until next time, ILL. Love you guys.